Welcome to Faith at Work, the podcast where we inspire and equip professionals to live out their Christian faith in the workforce. Whether you're navigating leadership, balancing work-life challenges, or looking to make a deeper impact, we're here to equip and guide you on how to bring your faith into work. Now here's your host, the director of the Unity Foundation in Alexandria, Minnesota, Kelsey Tim.
Today we're joined by Kevin Coder, Vice President of Spiritual Life at Vivie, with a background in psychology, ministry, and chaplaincy, including service as a senior pastor and a chaplain in the Minnesota Army National Guard. Kevin brings a deep well of experience and compassion to his work. At Vivie, he leads a team of chaplains and oversees programs that support the spiritual well-being of both clients and staff. In this conversation, Kevin shares his passion for meeting people where they are, the power of presence in the workplace, and why corporate chaplaincy is becoming such a vital part of company culture. So welcome, Kevin. I'm really excited to dive into this conversation today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's get started. So, Kevin, your journey has taken you both from youth ministry to military chaplaincy to now leading spiritual life at Vivie. Can you share how these experiences have shaped your calling?
Yeah, I grew up in a very broken home, if you will. And so throughout my life had a lot of transitions. And so, and was drawn into ministry, at a very young age through camp, church camp. And so, but that whole, as far as living through transitions and working through transitions kind of stayed with me my whole life. And so, from youth pastor, senior pastor to Army chaplain, now VP of spiritual life at Vivie, I always been drawn to people in transition. So whether it's teens trying to figure out who they are, or soldiers in crisis, dealing with being in a combat zone and what that means, or caregivers in grief and compassion fatigue, just been drawn to people who are trying to kind of in that Exodus period where they're kind of in the middle, stuck in the middle, going somewhere different, trying to get to somewhere different, but not sure what that looks like. And so just been a sacred call to be with people in change and transition. It's as far as the big theme that I've found through, whether it's military chaplaincy or youth ministry or, now caring for seniors and in our caregivers at our communities and our hospice workers, as well as our home health care workers, is just showing up wherever people are and being present with them. It's which naturally leads to the work that I do now.
Mm-hmm. I was actually just having a conversation with a friend earlier today, and we were talking about how so many people really struggle to sit with somebody in pain and suffering. And when I think of, end of life, that can be, some people really do have that long suffering and it's painful. And then there's the family piece of it. And so it's a gift, honestly. And it usually takes like your own suffering that you've had to walk through personally to be able to get to that place of really being able to sit with somebody while they're walking through that too.
Yeah, Kelsey, you said it so well, right? There's a true gift in being able to be truly present with people that you're with and be present with them in their pain as well. It's a sacred spot that chaplains enter into. And it's a spot in which they have to offer some vulnerability to kind of be in that sacred space with people who are also being vulnerable and working through whatever's going on in their life, right? Whether it's, moving into a new community, whether it's, in the last chapter, the days or hours of their life, being in that sacred spot is just it's a very, especially in that spot in which the veil between life and death is so thin, mm-hmm. and it is sacred work.
Yeah, it really is. So what drew you specifically to the work of corporate chaplaincy? And maybe we are touching on that a little bit, mm-hmm. but you can expand more on that theme.
Yeah. So for those who are not familiar with corporate chaplaincy, we provide emotional, spiritual, relational support, regardless of someone's background. So we meet people where they're at. We're like kind of the first call when life happens, whether it's grief, conflict, stress, burnout, or sometimes just a need to be seen. And so as far as like what's drawn me to that and what's allowed me to live in that space is just that calling, in which I feel God has called me to be in that space, to show up for people, to be present for people. Like I said, it's sacred work.
Yeah, it really is. So how do you and your team practically meet people where they are in a workplace setting?
Yeah, corporate chaplaincy and chaplaincy in general really is it's less about preaching. It's more about just, as I mentioned before, this theme of just being present. We go to the break rooms, to the walking paths, to the parking lots, and we listen, right? And, as far as being proactive when it comes to check-ins, or, we've done traumatic event management debriefings when communities have gone through some sort of trauma or crisis event, or just work with people and be present with them as they just go through the suffering sometimes of life. And also, during organizational changes. So recently, Vivie has, if you don't know Vivie's history, Vivie is actually the merger of two senior living organizations, Walker Methodist, which was primarily in the cities, and then Canute Nelson, which is primarily here in Alexandria, but also up in the Dakotas as well. And they merged together about a year and a half ago. So in that has been some transitions and some changes that our employees are working through. And so being a chaplain also means checking within. Of course, during the pandemic, the stress and the that came with working and being a caregiver during that time. A lot of times our caregivers suffered from compassion fatigue, of just constantly working with people who were dying from that horrible illness. And so being with them and walking alongside them as they suffer.
Yeah. And that kind of rolls into the next question is, what are some of the most common situations chaplains walk through with employees? And, COVID is a great example of that, because that rocked everybody's world. It was new, and trying to navigate all of that, and lots of opinions, and then lots of sickness, lots of loss.
Yeah. When an event like the pandemic happens, and especially if you're a primary caregiver in that, an event like that, a lot of times, it's a very spiritual thing, right? You're trying to figure out who you are and what your purpose is. And if the things that you're doing, especially if you're putting yourself at risk to care for people, there has to be some meaning in that. And so helping people make meaning in the suffering that they're experiencing, but also like the work that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And it's so important, I think, for our team members and our workers to find purpose and meaning in what they do. Because I think that when someone does that, then there's so much joy that comes along with like living into your calling, right? Mm-hmm. So of course, the death of a loved one, we help our team members work through that. Caregiver burnout, like I've mentioned before, caregiver fatigue, mental health struggles. Mental health struggles are very common in our world today. And so helping people walk through, and work through depression and anxiety, family issues, mm-hmm. divorce, financial issues, giving people resources to help navigate some of those things. And then, like I said before, just finding purpose in the work that they do. Caregiving is not always the easiest job. Mm-hmm. It's a job that sometimes takes from you. And so if you don't, and you're constantly pouring out. And so if you don't have something to fill that cup, then it's a really hard job to do. And so chaplains come alongside our team members and help them find the things that fill their cup so they can pour into the lives of other people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's that concept of learning how to live from rest. If you're, a follower of Jesus really modeled that well, right? Taking the Sabbath. And I think that's kind of become a lost thing. Yeah. But I see like a movement of it coming back again. And I've read some really great books on the Sabbath and doing things that bring delight to your heart and that delight in the Lord. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, of like helping people really embrace rest, because we live in such a culture of hurry, productivity, but especially in this line of work where you're caring for people, like you were just saying, you're giving of yourself over and over again. And that's where we need the Holy Spirit to come and to fill us up. There's that exchange. Yeah. And so how would you encourage somebody to really start to embrace more of that lifestyle of living from rest?
Yeah, I think that's great. I always say that Jesus napped, so we should nap too.
I agree. I'm a good power napper.
Yeah, that's awesome. Self-care is so important. And, one of the questions I ask people a lot is, if you had an 8th day of just rest, then how would you spend it? And so, what are the top 3 things that you would do? And it's a way to find out about someone, but also then turn it back to them and say, you should be doing these things anyway. Like, this is why God has given us a Sabbath. And so, and it may not fall on Sunday because we know our caregivers, they sometimes have complex schedules, but make that time because, as I said before, it's a job in which, you give and give of yourself, and it's hard to do if you don't fill that cup up. So helping people, part of a chaplain's job is helping people really find those things that bring them joy and bring them fulfillment and contentment that way, so they can pour out. Because, I tell a lot of our caregivers, I say, the work that you do really is not a job. It's a calling. The act of caring for someone else, because of what it takes from you, like, it has to be a calling. If not, you're going to get burnout. Mm-hmm. And so having people live into that idea of their job or their career being a calling. And what does that mean? And the meaning behind that, as well as a purpose into living your calling. Because, I got to say, as someone who's worked in different jobs, when I've lived my calling, I've been the happiest that I've ever been. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really that trust piece of really partnering with the Lord. When you are looking for a job, and to really, I use the term like follow your peace. That's a fruit of the Spirit, right? It comes from the Lord. It's not earthly. It's not shaken when the world around us is. But I'm with you. Like, we need to be where God has called us to be, because He knows what He designed us, right? So He knows our sweet spot. Yeah. Not that it's not going to be hard, but it is going to be so life-giving when we're in step with Him with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've mentioned, the power of listening to people's stories. So why is that central to your role?
Everyone has a story. And this is the thing I probably love about my job the most is being someone who can listen to people's stories. But it's one of those things that takes intentionality and mindfulness to be present into someone's story. Like I said, everyone has a story. People just need someone to see them before they can be healed sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so the act of listening to someone's story, and then also appreciating the vulnerability that comes to share a story, it just is such a powerful thing. I would say that in all my roles that I've ever worked in, whether it's, a youth minister, a senior pastor, a Army chaplain, and then now a chaplain within senior living, what I've learned is listening matters the most, much more than preaching. Mm-hmm. Just being there to listen to someone's story, and to be able to hear that story, to give power and meaning and to that story, it's pretty amazing for somebody.
Yeah, it is. And I have a tendency to want to fix, and I think other people do too, but to be able to just sit and listen and not provide solutions if they're not asking for them, that takes maturity and experience, I think, just learning how to sit with people.
Yeah. So
that's really important.
Yeah, I would say it's one of the hardest part, and some of them, our chaplains make it look so easy, but one of the hardest jobs is, for me anyways, coming into chaplaincy really was this desire not to have to fix something, but mm-hmm. just to be present and to listen, because they weren't looking for me to fix their problems. Mm-hmm. They were looking for me to walk alongside them and to be the person that could sit there and be with them. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times our family members of our clients and our patients and residents, they have a hard time being present. And so that's why it's powerful for a chaplain to come in and to kind of show that, mm-hmm. that all their family member needs or their loved one needs is for you just to be there.
Mm-hmm. I think, Jesus did a really great job of being present in messy people's lives,
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in what ways does chaplaincy help employees find meaning, comfort, or purpose, especially in times of crisis or transition?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to crises or transition, I think there's definitely a spiritual dimension to suffering. And you mentioned that a little bit earlier, and naming pain, seeking purpose or meaning in suffering, and then restoring hope. I think, and chaplains have a great way, we're kind of hope dealers, right? Like we have a great way of listening, of, like I said, if needed, to help people come alongside people to help them make meaning of whatever transition or whatever crises or whatever suffering they're experiencing. And then hopefully walk them to a way where they where hope can be restored. And of course, as chaplains, we use whatever connection they have to whatever higher power they have to help restore that hope, whether it's Jesus Christ or God or whoever it might be for them, but to end in a way that they finish that, as far as that, they come out with hope, which I think is one of the most powerful things.
Mm-hmm. It really is. So, Kevin, how have you seen spiritual care affect the culture of a workplace or the morale of a team?
Yeah, I think, when people feel supported as a whole person, body, mind, soul, morale improves. Teams trust each other more, turnover goes down, burnout decreases. And so I think part of chaplaincy is, like a lot of times we have healthcare insurance for the physical part of who we are. A lot of times we have, employee assistance programs to help people with their mental health problems. But we never really cover the spiritual side of people, and people are very spiritual, right? That's a part of who we are, and so, I think everyone needs to connect to something higher than themselves, and chaplains do that. They help them connect to something higher than themselves to bring them purpose, to bring them meaning, to find the why of why we get up in the morning. And so chaplains have a way to come alongside people and help them do that. So bringing chaplaincy, corporate chaplaincy to your business is a way in which you're really meeting the whole person, your whole employee. There's, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of changes and transitions with this recent merger. And we have a team wellness chaplain, Chaplain Erin, and she does amazing work. She has a background in marriage and family therapy as well as an ordained pastor, and just has done some amazing work working with our team members as we walk through the changes and the transitions that come alongside a merger. She's kind of helped anchor leaders and team members through the grief, through the rebuilding process, rebuilding trust. And so it's been really foundational in us moving forward together as Vivie.
That's great. And I think you pretty much just answered the next question. Let's see if other examples, which that was wonderful. Is there any other stories where a chaplain's presence made a lasting impact? Yeah,
unfortunately, at one of our communities, we had one of our team members who took his own life. Mm-hmm. And he was a beloved team member who worked there for a long time. And the first call from the operations director was to me and said, "Hey, we need to deploy a chaplain to this community." And so, so we deployed not only the community chaplain, but also our team wellness chaplain to that community. And they came alongside that community and was able to do some traumatic event management debriefing and walk alongside them, and then do some, individual pastoral care and counseling with the people that were closest to the team member. And so in a time or in a situation that, so traumatic and such a huge loss and grief was found. And there's so many questions about the why, we were able to in such a short amount of time to offer someone that can walk alongside them and be there with them. And so it was super powerful.
I think of, us Midwesterns, we're really good at just plowing through, there's lots of different sayings around that, but it's actually really horrible advice.
Yes.
When we don't actually sit and allow ourselves to feel loss and grief and all of the emotions that come with it. I was actually pretty much a pro at that most of my life until my early 30s. And then the Lord's like, this isn't working for you anymore. And he let me actually examine the state of my heart. And we just, we build up walls because we don't want to feel pain. But I think that's such a beautiful example of, if you don't deal with it now, you're going to deal with it at some point in your life. And then it just gets messier and messier. And so I see that as such a gift to bring into communities. And we know that healing isn't linear, right? God knows what we can handle. So there's a lot of layers to it, but really to set them up for success, give them tools, and then it's just going to help them in the long run. And I think of that, for businesses that do have the budget to have a chaplain on staff, I'm like, what a gift that is for that company. Because life is hard and there's so many things that are outside of our control that cause us to feel big things, right? Usually it's some sort of pain, but to be able to help people process that's so vital for organizations.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. As a military chaplain, especially, right? Soldiers, I was deployed, about 5 years ago now, to Iraq and Syria, and it was a very kinetic deployment. A lot of missile attacks, rocket attacks, and we took casualties, and we didn't come home with everyone that we left with. And so it was a tough deployment. And in the military kind of has the same kind of mantra of just keep your head down and keep moving. But you're exactly right that it always comes back, and so the job of the chaplain there and here as well. And I think the chaplain in every kind of field that a chaplain works in really is to help people process that stuff in the moment or shortly after, help them process those moments that affect us physically, obviously mentally, but also spiritually as well. And so helping soldiers deal with spiritual distress, and allowing them to process those things, so valuable. As far as, studies have shown so much that when soldiers process, when anybody processes trauma in the moment or shortly after, it decreases, PTSD. And so, it's a powerful job of a chaplain to help people process kind of the hard stuff in life and to help people through that.
Yeah. Another concept that I've really been diving into is suffering and entering into Christ's suffering, what he did through the cross. He experienced all the emotions that we do. And for me personally, when I've brought in Jesus into my pain, yes, it's important to talk and process, but that's really where I've received deep healing, is when I bring Jesus into that.
I love that. When I first became a Christian, or was called, my first calling, to accept Christ in my life, it was, like I said, I mentioned, it was at camp. And back then, I don't know if they do this anymore, but back then they had a crucifixion pageant in which, I'd walk down this trail and, it'd open up and you'd see the, 3 counselors on this cross. But, I saw Jesus up there. And for me, that was very powerful. Whatever atonement theory you believe in, it just to see the sacrifice and the suffering of a Savior, and then and tie it into your own, as a teenager. I had the teenage angst of, I'm suffering too, of course, and at least I thought I was, and so to tie that together and to bring Christ's suffering into my suffering is such a powerful thing. Because we all suffer. It's a part of being the human experience ever since the fall, right? And so, and Christ is not, didn't spare himself from that. He joins us in that. And so that's so powerful that we have a Savior that does that. Yeah.
How do you approach spiritual conversations in diverse, multi-faith, or even secular workplace?
Yeah, it's important, right? It's important that we lead with curiosity, not an agenda. Working in pluralistic environment is not for everybody, right? Because a lot of times, especially in the military, for example, like we're not called to proselytize or evangelize. And so we're just there to be present, and so a lot of times you do have to come with a curiosity, and then, be there to answer questions that might come, to honor everyone's beliefs or the lack therefore of. Our care is always invitational. It's never imposed. And then obviously it's important for chaplains to, just be aware of, cultural competency, of interfaith partnerships. So, a lot of times as chaplains, we can either provide services or rituals, or we can either perform them, ourselves, or we can provide them through someone else. So a lot of times we'll have a Rolodex of, rabbis or imams that can come alongside and offer some of those things. And so, so it's very important to meet people where they're at, or sometimes if they're lost, to help them find kind of their way. But it's tough. And there's some convictions that go along with that of how do you live as how do you honor your own faith tradition, your own beliefs in a place in which, you can help people connect to their person or their God, but in a way that's powerful for them and connects with them, and he's healing for them, but not imposing. It can be a challenge.
I can imagine I would have a hard time keeping my mouth shut about Jesus, but it's so true though about staying curious. And I think that's a great thing for us to remember in all sorts of situations, instead of us like accusing, right? To seek to understand. So I think that's something that I've really had to grow in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think we see that, in Jesus was a very curious person. Right? He knew all the answers, yet, when he interacts with people that are outside, or like, I think of the Good Samaritan, the Samaritan at the well, and interactions with her and just, not judgmental per se, but just out of curiosity and out of love and grace. And I think, as chaplains, we're called to be people of curiosity, of love, and of grace. And like I said, meet people where they're at.
Yeah. So where do you see the future of spiritual care heading, especially in the marketplace?
Yeah, I see a hunger for meaning, of meaning making. There's a lot of organizations that are leaning into creating environments, and having clear missions and values. And so I think there's a hunger for meaning making in the workplace, and also mental health support, especially, post pandemic, in the especially in the healthcare field. And so I think there'll always be I actually see an increase in companies who are welcoming chaplains to be part of their staff and to care for their people, because they want to, like I said before, they want to care for the whole body. Team wellness models are growing rapidly. So, employers are understanding that it's we can't just give them a paycheck and then have them work and then expect them to be happy and stick around. With retention, as far as staffing shortages happening, we have to make our people happy and provide a place that's not just a place to work, but for a place to live into that, the space in which they are working for, 40 hours or more a week. And so, team wellness models are starting to grow rapidly because they want to create an environment in which people want to go to work and are excited to be at work. And so part of that is, providing care for the whole body, mind, body, soul. Mm-hmm. And so, I think it'll continue to grow, as long as we have employers that really care for their employees.
Yeah. Well, I think a term that you've used to describe maybe your different campuses is care communities, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really what we're wired to belong, right? And especially you want to feel that where you're spending the most part of your day is you want to feel all those things that you were just talking about. And so I do see need. And then just this next generation entering into the workforce, they have some of the higher statistics of anxiety, isolation, depression. They grew up now with screens and social media. So that's going to be like a whole nother dynamic of people really needing spiritual care. So that'll be really interesting. I'll give you 5 years and then we'll do another interview and you can talk more about that as that demographic or that generation is really now entering into the workforce.
Yeah, I would actually love that. You keyed on to something very important. We are meant to be in community and live into community. And so people, when they go to work, they want that workplace to be their community or their tribe or their people. And so part of that is creating an environment in which, their needs are being met, and as I mentioned throughout this whole interview, it's the power in giving someone meaning in the work that they do and giving someone purpose in the work that they do. And as you mentioned, the younger generation that are coming in, we find that they really want that. Like that's something that's very important to them to have a job that they feel like makes a difference in the world, a job that they have meaning, that they have purpose. And so that generation really wants that. But you're also right. They also carry this baggage of anxiety and increased depression. And so mental health is very important to them. And so resources around mental health, around, the whole being is important. And even though there's been a huge exodus of of organized religion, unfortunately in the recent years, people are very much still spiritual. They want to connect with something. And so, so chaplains kind of allow them, to give them some framework, to connect with something bigger than themselves. And, hopefully it's a way that's powerful as well as intentional.
Mm-hmm. What encouragement would you give to leaders who want to invest in the holistic care of their teams?
Your people are your greatest asset. So caring for their whole selves isn't just extra, it's essential. And as I said before, as the new generations come up through the workforce, their spiritual part of who they are is important to them. So chaplains, they bring meaning and purpose to your team members. So start with presence, lead with empathy. For us, Vivie, servant leadership is one of the most important things for us. It's really the vessel or the medium that we use to carry out our mission, to carry out our values. And part of spirit, servant leadership is this idea of being a leader that offers grace and offers empathy to the people that they lead. And so hopefully you can do that as a leader, but also partner with people who can hold that sacred space as well.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. How can business owners or leaders learn more about Vivie and bring chaplaincy to their organization?
Yeah, so Vivie, if you don't know much about Vivie, Vivie is a senior living organization. So we have, over 30 communities that we either own or manage, or we provide chaplain support for. There is hospice, and we have home health care as well. Like I said, it's at this point we're mostly in Minnesota, but we have a community in Wisconsin, and we have communities up in the Dakotas as well. We just purchased and partnered alongside a campus down in Northfield, so we're continuing to grow. We want to continue to kind of move in that direction and transition and keep growing. So it's a great organization, and one of the big employers here in Alexandria, of course. Of course, you can go to the Vivie website, and of course, if you can reach out to me directly as well.
And then also with the chaplaincy, do you guys have it? So maybe there's a small business, and maybe they don't have it in their budget to have somebody full time. Does Vivie do you guys offer that service yet, or is that something you've thought about?
Yeah, we so right now we're offering. We do chaplaincy on contract for communities that we don't own or we don't manage, and so we're willing to and something that there's about 5 communities now that we offer chaplain services for, and would love to expand to corporate chaplaincy as well. So because I think we do corporate chaplaincy here at Vivie very, very well. And so something that we would love to get into. And so, if you're a small organization and you would essentially just need a chaplain, maybe to be there once a week, that sort of thing, we can offer contract chaplaincy for smaller organizations.
And that's any type of work. It doesn't have to be specifically the line that you're in.
Nope.
Okay.
Chaplaincy is one of those things that plays well in, as we talked about today, right? Because, if you work in the business of people and you have people that work for you, people have, the whole people, body, mind, and soul. And so, they need someone to help them with that spiritual side and sometimes that mental health side too. So, any industry would be willing to go and work in.
Yeah. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of your experience and just the stories. And before we wrap up, do you have anything else that you'd like to share or anything that's been on your heart?
I think that, just kind of a closing thought, if you will, is that, whether in the military or at a bedside or in a boardroom, people want to know that they matter and that what they do is purposeful and has as far as gives them meaning. And then chaplaincy really reminds them that it does. And that's kind of the power in the chaplain, as well as, the sacredness of being in that space. And so I love being a chaplain, and I love the opportunity to come and talk about chaplaincy. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And it's very evident that you're in your sweet spot right now. So thank you for your time and your advice and wisdom.
Thanks so much, Kelsey.
Thank you for joining us on Faith at Work. We hope today's episode has inspired and equipped you to live out your faith in the workforce. Don't forget to subscribe, share with a friend, and join us next time as we continue to equip you on your journey of faith at work. Faith at Work brought to you by the Unity Foundation. Learn more at unityfoundation-alexandria.com.